I caught part of an interview that you did with Eric Douglas.
Okay.
And you said in that interview with public broadcasting, let's celebrate the fact that as a region, Appalachia is one of the most diverse in the country, and we're very unique. If nothing else, we are a unique group of people. Expand for people who and believe it or not, I've got some folks who listen in South Africa.
Wow.
And so um it's I don't have a ton of people following the podcast, but I have them from all over the place. So can you remember that interview enough to expand on what that means? We're a unique group of people for people who aren't familiar with West Virginia. Or am I going
That's
back suddenly too far for you to remember?
and it's a good question. It's I I talk about it a lot and I think about it a lot. West Virginia, and probably every state feels this way.
Mm-hmm.
And every country feels, they're unique. But West Virginia, to me, and Appalachia more
Mm-hmm.
broadly, um, we always say it has a distinct culture. But the thing that hits me is we have so many distinct cultures within that culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, in terms of the diversity, a lot of people have left West Virginia, over the last 50 years,
Yeah.
really 70 years.
Yeah.
And we're one of the few states that's losing population. And I think like 4% of the state now is black. Um, but at one time, because of the coal mines, particularly, but also factories, we had a pretty substantial black population,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in the coal fields and in the
Mm-hmm.
cities. And in the early 1900s, um, we per capita had more immigrants. Like in 1917, we had more immigrants in West Virginia per capita than any other state.
Yes.
Um, and that some of them, the children of those people have gone on, like Joe Manchin has gone on to be governor and U.S. senator. Um, that the descendant of Italian immigrants,
Mm-hmm.
and you see that all over the place. That there's still an imprint from that. A friend of mine, his great grandparents immigrated from Italy and
Right.
Sicily,
Mm-hmm.
and they made they brought their Italian sausage recipe, which of course was a sausage recipe, but and they sold it for years out of a little grocery store up in Fayette County, and
Mm-hmm.
now they market it kind of based on that heritage, and telling the family story about how great grandmother in 1907 or something like that brought the recipe with her.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got that ethnic and racial diversity in our history, in our culture, and we see it in music, we see it in food and things like that. But the reason it developed, kind of the culture developed uniquely here, is that we're so mountainous. Is that it's hard to it's hard to describe for somebody who's not here just how mountainous we are. And we're not
Mm-hmm.
mountainous like the Rocky Mountains, but the Rocky Mountains are one giant mountain chain that are much taller than what we have. But we had these rolling hills and mountains and jagged rock outcroppings all over the place to the point where there's very little flat land, which affected settlement patterns, it affected farming, it affected transportation mostly. So if you can live a couple of miles from somebody your whole life and never meet them.
Yeah.
They might just live over the mountain in the next holler, and you never even see them, didn't even know they existed maybe.
Because you
um,
didn't go over the mountain.
yeah, and so you had very distinct, almost ways of talking or dialect. It might be people talk about a West Virginia dialect. You can break that down into different parts of Kanawha County. Our
Yeah.
county have different
Mm-hmm.
dialects. Um, you know, you can go to almost any county in West Virginia, particularly the most mountainous ones, and you can tell from the east to the west to the north to the south.
Yep.
It's like, okay, people may talk a little differently here. It's like the food might be different, only 20
Yeah.
miles apart. Music, there's, old fiddle tunes that, are hundreds of years old. And, in this part, in one county, they play this old tune one way, and, 30 miles away in the next county, they play it completely differently. It's not completely different, but it's their own variation on it. I like to use that example because it just shows that even something like a 200 or 300-year-old fiddle tune adapted differently because of the people's lifestyles and where they were at and where they lived. All that's changing to a great extent in the internet age, and it started with TV, but internet is really, and the good part is it breaks down barriers so people in South Africa and all over the world can hear us talk about West Virginia. But at the same time, then all of this kind of, these cultures blend together, and we kind of lose some of that traditional culture that we've had here that is just, to me, so unique. I don't know of any other state that has so many different elements. And you can go, we've got an eastern panhandle, a northern panhandle, southern coal fields. We've got kind of a metro valley where, it's about a seventh of all the people in West Virginia live in this one valley between Charleston and Huntington. And every part of the state is very different. It's, and you hear this all the time. It's like, well, that's not even like it's in West Virginia. I used to hear that. I used to live in the eastern panhandle, and I would hear it's like, well, that's not even like Virginia or West Virginia. It's more like Maryland or Virginia. And to a point, you see that because you're tied to the land and where your transportation routes are. So you might be closer to Virginia or Maryland, but there's still a West Virginia thing, and that I can't define, and I've stopped trying to define it. And I think it's best that we probably don't define it because it lets us be, it doesn't put us in a box as to who we are. But it's very different wherever you go. But there's still something a little different about these people. And part of the thing to me too also goes back to the history, is that, like, looking at my relatives, my ancestors were German ancestry primarily, and they in the 1700s, they immigrated to this country and came into the Philadelphia area, and most of them went down to the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. I passed the test. If you heard that.
I did.
So most of them, these German immigrants came down to the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and many of them settled there, and it was just wonderful farmland. And some of them went down further into North Carolina, and it's then stretched out all over the country. And then for some reason, it started getting crowded. As people found the good farmland, they started packing in the area even as early as the 1700s. And these early settlers, like my ancestor, they, for some reason, just took a right turn and decided, okay, we're going to go live in the mountains and try to grow corn on rocks.
I have some of those. And this gets back into some of those tired stereotype jokes. I don't know. We may have shared with you or not. I don't know. We don't make a secret out of it, but it's kind of funny. Wayne and I are actually cousins, and we are cousins 7 generations back from down in Lincoln County. And the common ancestors that we have down there are around Garrett's Bend, and they were growing corn on the hillside down in Garrett's Bend, So, and that's very familiar. But my particular ancestors came from England, Ireland, Scotland. And if you go back far enough, you get some of that German, Scandinavian, but the ones in the closest generations came from England, Ireland, Scotland. And I've been kind of a little fascinated with the Scottish side of that because it's very thin. And I've been just, online sleuthing. I've not done real, chasing down and real hardcore research on it, but online sleuthing, some of the family, and we're back. The Scottish part is, and I can't think of the name of the uh, clan right off now. I knew it for a long time. I just say it all the time, but now it's just escaped me. But it's on the northeastern side of Scotland, up in near one of the little coves up there. Excuse me. And I had it chased down real hard there for a while, and then the ones that came out of England are related to the Morgans that settled Morgan County, that all through there, and then on my mom's side, they come up out of Virginia, but they were from Ireland and they come up out of Virginia. So, but then this one bunch ends up over in Garrett's Bend, and their descendants are the ones that came up off the railroad, came out of the hollows with the railroad to come up here to, start working up here at the Dickinson on the Dickinson K&M.
And that's the early history of what's now West Virginia. Is it was primarily Germans and Scots-Irish. Those were the main settlers until really after the Civil War, when the railroads came and the coal mines came, and there was a need for all this labor. But it was very much German and Scots-Irish settlers.
Yeah. So, and